Welcome to another edition of E.W. Jackson for America. Great to be with you again today. I hope you're off to a great start today. I want to talk a little bit about yesterday, which is unusual because I really should have mentioned this on the program yesterday, and I neglected to do it. So let me come back to it. Yesterday, I did an interview with Sean Hannity on his radio program talking about America's Forgotten Children. That's this website right here, that one, America's Forgotten Children. And Sean was gracious enough to allow me to be on his program and to talk about an issue that obviously is near and dear to him, which is the crime that's going on in the streets of our cities across the country right now. I hope that you will visit America's Forgotten Children and you will tell people about it, because there are several aspects to this that I think are really critical to the future of our country, And so let me explain that, because that might, you think, well, that seems a little bit overly broad. First of all, it goes to the issue of racial division in the country, which I think is a poison pill for America. Yeah, I think that if we don't get the issue of racial division under control in our country, we are going to implode from within. Jesus said a house divided against itself cannot stand. He didn't say it might not stand. He didn't say there was a probability that it might not. He said it cannot stand. It can't. And the left, the Democrat Party, traffic in division, racial division, particularly division on all levels, but racial division in particular. And I don't know whether you caught the news yesterday, but the mayor of Chicago was asked about visiting the border. I think I might have mentioned it on the program yesterday. And his response was, "I'm a black man, and I've got a black wife, and I'm raising black children." Just bizarre. But that's where they're coming from. They really are so racially obsessed that they want all of us divided. Well, remember the former mayor said that she wasn't going to interview or deal with any reporters if they weren't black. She was excluding all non-black reporters from any discussions or interviews with her or asking her questions. I mean, these people are racially obsessed. I mean, we've got the Super Bowl. They're going to play the so-called black national anthem. It just disgusts me every time I say it. And it's sad because a perfectly decent Christian hymn, which is what that was intended to be, Lift Every Voice, has now been perverted into something it was never intended to be, and by the way, cannot be, because there aren't two American nations, there's only one. So there is no black national anthem. There's only one national anthem. And if you want to sing another song, that you like, fine, sing another song, but don't call it a black national anthem. But that's where we are. We are in an era, perhaps worse than anything we've experienced since the 1960s. I don't even think it was this bad after the Civil War. Maybe when Reconstruction ended and the Democrat Party in the South began to flex their muscles and the Ku Klux Klan was created. But I wouldn't really call that racial division. I just call that terrorism. And that's all that was. By the way, terrorism designed by the Democrat Party and implemented by the Democrat Party. And since the Democrat Party and the left are always talking about the past and talking about slavery, I wonder, why don't Republicans ever bring up the Ku Klux Klan history of the Democrat Party and the slavery history of the Democrat Party? Because the Democrat Party really was the party of slavery, and I've argued that it still is, by the way. I'm about to do a video on that very subject. Stand by for it. It'll be coming shortly. So racial division is a major issue. These forgotten children are the victims of this racial division. So it's taking lives. I think long term, it undermines our country and our future. But on an immediate basis, it's actually taking the lives of children. How so? Because when George Floyd died as a result of this police officer doing something he never should have done, which was wrong, totally wrong. When I was interviewing with Sean Hannity, we brought this up, and that's the thing. The whole country was in agreement about that. You couldn't find any Americans who thought, yeah, having your knee on a man's neck for, I guess, a total of 9 minutes, whatever it was, is a good thing. You got him handcuffed, you got him subdued, and you got your knee on his neck, and that's a great thing to do. I don't think anybody believes that. The whole country was united in horror over what they saw. But then the left got a hold of it. Then the Democrat Party began to exploit it. And the riots started. And the mayhem started. And the murders started. And the lawlessness started. That's when the whole issue of the problem of having people go into these retail stores en masse and just rip them off en masse. That's when this whole movement to say, well, as long as it's under $1,000, it's no big deal. That's when you had started merchants telling their employees, if they take it, just let them walk out with the stuff. All of that started right after the death of George Floyd. Well, immediately after that whole debacle started, the murders of children ratcheted up, and it has not gone down since. And you may remember, but one of the earliest victims of this new lawlessness, this enhanced lawlessness that really gripped the nation after the death of George Floyd and the beginning of exploiting that by all of these race hustlers and race pimps and the Democrat Party, which is just a race exploiter, which they always have been. That's their history, frankly. When they began to exploit this, the lawlessness began, and the shootings and the robberies and the carjackings. I said carjackings have been going up in D.C. since then, and last year, 2023, they were double what they were in 2022. So these children, and the first one I want to point out to you, one of the early casualties was a child by the name of Legend Taliaferro. Y'all remember that? Legend Taliaferro was a young child. Let's see, was he 4 years old in Kansas City, Missouri, and he was lying in his bed sleeping when apparently a bunch of thugs decided that they were going to shoot up his house, and a bullet went through the house and killed 4-year-old Legend Taliaferro dead. Dead. Now, if you go to the Forgotten Children website and you look up Legend, you just put in the search bar, go to the Gallery of Forgotten Children, and in the search engine put in Legend, Legend. You could put in his first name, but the spelling, I think we've got the proper spelling on the website, but it's Taliferro. Well, that's a little bit more complicated because I've spelled it with 2 F's and 2 L's, but Legend is easy to spell, and if you put in Legend, it'll bring him up. 4 years old, shot dead for nothing. And little did we know that was just the tip of the iceberg. That was the beginning. We are now up to 606 children murdered since then. 606. And again, just so you understand something, we exclude gangbangers. Not that their lives aren't valuable, they are. But we wanted to call attention to the innocents, to children who've done nothing to anybody, to the law-abiding. Now, this includes some teenagers, but we always look for circumstances We exclude circumstances where a teenager is engaged in lawless behavior himself or herself, where they're part of a gang or where they're shooting or where they're involved in some way. And I'm not saying we've got this perfectly, but we're pretty fastidious about making sure that we're choosing kids based upon the circumstances of their deaths and excluding those who are doing anything to bring it upon themselves. If we included all of them, it would be hundreds more, probably thousands more. As it is, 606 murdered kids. Legend Taliaferro, 4 years old, was among the earliest casualties. Not far from where I live, Richmond, Virginia, Neziah, 3 months old, murdered with her mother sitting out on the lawn of their apartment building, enjoying a beautiful spring day, when some guys decided that they were going to have a beef with each other, and they killed both the mother and the child, shot them both dead. Now, this is the result. This is the direct result of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, far from saving lives, is taking black lives. Because when they started this stupid, this asinine defund the police movement and said, well, we got to reimagine law enforcement, and we don't really need cops, and we got to do away with the police forces and all this craziness. And of course, at the same time, vilifying cops. They're racist, they're murderers, they're killers, they're dangerous, they're the bad people, they're the problem. So that you end up having police officers, just like in New York right now, they've got more retiring and quitting than they are recruiting. All over the country, you've got a shortage of law enforcement officers because people are looking at that thinking, why in the world would I want to put my life on the line for that low salary and then at the same time be vilified and villainized and have everything said against me and call me everything but a child of God because I'm trying to serve my community honorably and decently? Why in the world would I put up with that? Why would I put my life on the line when people hate me rather than honoring me because I'm trying to help them and trying to save them? And as a result, and all of these liberal policies, cashless bail, you can steal up to $1,000 and it's kind of a misdemeanor. And you've got places now where, I think California is one of them, where assaulting a police officer is a misdemeanor. It's no more than like a traffic ticket. When you do all of that, what do you expect? Because the criminal class knows that the police are no longer a deterrent, and they know that even if the police show up, they are not to be respected. You can fight them, you can shoot them, you can kill them, and who cares? And then the result you get, since if you listen to these idiots like Black Lives Matter and Al Sharpton and all these other race hustlers and race pimps, you would think, oh, well, that a lot more black people are living now because the police aren't killing them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. A lot more black people are dying now because the police aren't there to protect them. Now, that's the reality. That's the truth. But you won't hear that in the mainstream media. So America's Forgotten Children is intended to bring us together around the common understanding that we all care about our children and we all understand certain basic things and we can unite around that. And it's also intended to say, particularly to the black community, these folks that claim to be your champions are getting you killed and getting your children killed, and they don't care. I said yesterday, forgive me for repeating this, but it needs to be repeated. Black Lives Matter is one of the biggest con jobs ever perpetrated on the American people in the history of our country. And I am not kidding. And I would include Bernie Madoff and this other Bitcoin kid who just got arrested, and they pale in significance. They pale in significance. Because Black Lives Matter extorted $100 million from corporate America and wealthy donors, thinking that they were doing something good, and all they were doing was, in effect, really hiring hitmen to engineer the murders of black people. Now, I know that's dramatic, but it's the truth. Because that's all Black Lives Matter did. It engineered the murders of black people. Not to mention doing tremendous disservice to this country and to any sense of commonality or a common destiny or unity, because people listen to them. Now, I'm quite gratified to say I didn't, and I denounced it from the very beginning because I knew that that thing was of the devil. I knew it. There was never any question in my mind. You had a lot of needle threaders. Well, I don't necessarily agree with Black Lives Matter, but, I understand the concept. I said, no, I don't understand the concept. Because the fact of the matter is all lives matter. And of course the lives of black people there matter, because the lives of all people matter. But the implication is that in America, the lives of black people don't matter, and therefore you got to say this explicitly. Well, that's a lie too. Because I guarantee you, for the average American across this country, they care about their fellow citizens and they don't care what the color of their skin is. I guarantee you that. I haven't done a scientific poll to prove it, but I've experienced enough of America to know it. America's forgotten children. It's more than about saving the lives of these children, or trying to save future children from being murdered, and acknowledging the murder and mayhem that is going on. It is really a critique of what has brought us to this point. So let me add a couple of other things. We have got to double down on supporting and honoring our police officers, because we're now finding out what happens when we don't. In spite of all of this rhetoric about how bad the cops are, look at where we are now. I mean, did you I'm sure you saw those 3 illegal immigrants just beating really, as far as I'm concerned, I saw them kick this cop in the head. When you kick somebody in the head, folks, you're trying to kill them. That's potentially fatal. You crack their skull, you kill that person. You can create a brain hemorrhage and that person will not survive. And I saw in the video I watched 2 kicks to the head of a police officer. Thank God he survived. And they didn't do a day. They didn't do a day. One of the things, I didn't make this part of my presidential campaign platform, but one of the things I've often considered is making the murder of a police officer a federal crime, so that you're subject to be prosecuted twice, at the state level and at the federal level. Because as far as I'm concerned, when you attack a police officer, you are attacking the civil rights and liberties of all of us. Because those are the people who defend us. Those are the people who are supposed to make it so that we don't have to take care of potential violent threats against us on our own. Right? I mean, we're supposed to be prepared to do that anyway, of course. But the existence of a legal system and police officers is supposed to mean, but you don't have to. We are there to try to protect you to the fullest extent possible, so that in most cases we trust our citizens don't have to become their own violent defenders, because we take the people off the streets who are potential threats to them. Well, you remove the cops, guess what? It's open season. We have got to support our police officers. Now, we have something also called Stand With Law Enforcement. It has a website of its own, needs some updating, but if you go to Stand With Law Enforcement, Stand With Law Enforcement, I think it's .com, Stand With Law Enforcement, you'll see another website that we've got for supporting our police officers and doing the things that we need to do. So here's the next thing. This is really not necessarily in order of importance, but we're creating something called the Family Restoration Institute because we understand that we've got to rebuild the families, because these kids that are acting out, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, sometimes a little bit older, but these kids are not being raised in a two-parent family with a father and a mother who love them, care about them, are going to discipline them, are going to teach them decency and morality and honor. They're being raised by the streets. Because again, folks, as a former foster care kid, I know once I got, and I wasn't even a teenager, I was still an adolescent, but once I got big enough that I could kind of move around on my own, and I was kind of hard to handle, which is about 10 years old, I didn't listen to my foster parents. I did whatever I wanted to do. They begged and pleaded and don't do this and don't do that. I didn't think about them. I really didn't, folks. Believe me, I remember it. They would threaten to discipline me with corporal punishment and would tell me go to the shed kitchen. Yeah, because we didn't have a bathroom, indoor bathroom. We had a shed kitchen and an outhouse. But they would tell me to go to the shed kitchen. The only thing I remember being in the shed kitchen was a galvanized tub for taking a Saturday night bath and I remember there being a washer there. I remember that because I went out and found 2 gardener snakes and I wanted to keep them, and I put them in the dishwasher, and my foster mother woke up one morning and came down. I think I must have still been asleep or something, but I remember just hearing this blood-curdling scream. When I heard it, I knew that she had gone to that dishwasher, because it wasn't like a modern dishwasher today where, it has a lid on it. It's one of those open things. You put the clothes in and you watch them, they just swash around, with the post in the middle with the blades on it. And she was down there. She walked in there and found 2 snakes in the dishwasher. That's how I remember that there was a dishwasher. There was a washer, a clothes washer in the shed kitchen. And you remember that expression, shed kitchen? Because that's what we had, a shed kitchen. I guess that was a shed built on the back of the house, and the kitchen wasn't there. We did have an indoor kitchen, but at any rate, so that's what I remember that. But they would tell me go to the shed kitchen because I was going to get a beating. I'd go to the shed kitchen, out the door, over the fence, and on about my business. I say, yeah, you going to beat me? Catch me. I'm serious. And it wasn't until my father came back into my life that I realized I couldn't do that anymore. He laid down the law, and all that kind of behavior ended pretty abruptly. And then, of course, my mother still wasn't around. I didn't really have any kind of relationship with my mother, but I did have my father in my life, and that was enough to put me on the straight and narrow. Didn't become perfect, mind you, of course, but I certainly stopped doing the things that were leading me to jail, because that's what I was doing prior to that. That's where I was going. And by the way, and looking forward to it. Like it was a badge of authority. A badge of honor. Because all the tough guys, all the bad guys, all the guys that everybody respected and feared had been to the penitentiary. Of course. It's like going to college. We've got to rebuild families, folks. We've got to rebuild families. And that's one of the things that America's Forgotten Children is going to focus on, because we can't just talk about the problem. We got to figure out solutions. And part of it is, by the way, if we can get away from all this racial insanity is to get communities together with police officers and start talking to each other. I just got a notice from the police officers, the police department in the town where our church exists, Chesapeake, asking to meet with pastors and to just talk about the circumstances of the community. Great. I was glad to hear that. That's an encouragement. When I went out to Ferguson, by the way, after the death of that kid out in Ferguson, I met with some pastors and was encouraging them to create an ongoing dialogue with the police department so that when bad things happen, as they inevitably will, you have some trust, you have a basis for communicating and for actually hearing the truth as opposed to just what the news media reports or what the racial propagandists report. So we've got to rebuild families. We've got to create a dialogue with police. And that's what we're going to be working on with America's Forgotten Children. I was happy to have an opportunity to talk to Sean Hannity about that yesterday. Now, the other thing that happened yesterday, I said I'm sort of doing this in retrospect. I think, by the way, there's a way to still to listen to that interview. I'm in fact trying to find out how you can hear it. I want to get an answer for that for you today, if possible. I'm asking that question of my staff. Every week on Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern Time, I have a National Awakening Coalition conference call. We've been having that call for, I don't know the exact day we started it, but I'm pretty sure it started in about 2010, if I'm not mistaken. So that means that call would be about 14 years old at least. It might be 15 years old, but 14, because I started, this year is going to be 15th year of STAND, and I think the call started shortly after I started STAND. So it's either 14 or 15 years old. Well, we have various guests on the program. So, for example, on the 27th, we're going to have Senator Tommy Tuberville on that conference call on the 27th of February. Yesterday, we had Gordon Chang. Gordon Chang, as you all know, is the expert on China. And it was a sobering discussion, folks, because Gordon Chang really does believe that if we don't begin to project strength, we're going to end up in a hot war with China. And I agree with him. I think that China believes that they are positioning themselves for just that and for an easy victory over the United States of America because we are demoralized within and because we depend upon China for so much of our manufacturing base that we would be crippled if they ever shut us off. See, they're a totalitarian state, so they can do whatever they want to do. And they're building relationships with other countries around the world, buying them, and I think really preparing for the day when they achieve absolute superiority over the United States of America in every way. When I say in every way, I don't mean obviously morally and spiritually because they're bankrupt, they're an atheist country, but I mean certainly militarily, economically, in terms of their ability to communicate their message around the world, all of that. And I thought to myself as I was talking to Gordon Chang, by the way, if you want to, I said I'm trying to find out how you can listen to the Hannity interview. If you want to listen to the Gordon Chang interview, all you have to do is go to standamerica.us, standamerica.us. and you go to the NAC call, the National Awakening Coalition call, and all of our calls are archived there. So you can go back and click on a call that you might have missed and hear it. But Gordon Chang's comments were very, very sobering. And I thought this to myself, and I asked him this question. We didn't have a chance to get into the extensive discussion that we need to get into, but it does strike me this way. Okay, you can go to Hannity.com and click on podcast, and you can hear my interview from yesterday. Hannity.com and click on podcast, and you can hear my interview from yesterday. Okay, it happened at 45 after the hour, so I'm not sure where that fits within his program. Forgive me, folks, I don't have more details for you, but you can probably easily find it if you go to Hannity.com and just click on podcast. But at any rate, this is the thought that I have about this. I don't believe that any country can outdo us in terms of our economic productivity, and that includes China. Not even close. They're having economic problems right now and internal problems right now. I think that the problem that we have in our country, the potential danger to us in terms of our national security and our posture in the world, is really spiritual and moral. Because if we become demoralized as a country and we're raising up a generation of young people who don't think America is worth fighting for, worth preserving, worth defending, we're in no position to defend ourselves anyway. China's got an army, I think, of about 1.5 million. And they are getting armed to the teeth, of course. So Sun Tzu argued that the best way to fight a war is to bring your enemy to the point where they can't fight. That's the best way. You win the war before the war even starts. And of course, we know that the Chinese culture plays the long game. That's kind of the nature of their culture. They don't, America is still a very young country. China, of course, as a nation as we know it, is still young, but still as a culture, it is thousands of years old. And part of what we've got to do, and this is part of what Stan is dedicated to, with all this so-called identity politics, is we've got to reclaim the American identity. Not the black identity, the white identity, the homosexual identity, the man's identity, the women's identity. I mean, nothing wrong with men and women reclaiming the mantle that God has put on us as human beings and our role in this life. Nothing wrong with that. But what I'm getting at is we've got to reclaim our common destiny as a people and our commonality as Americans and our common understanding of the nature of our country as a nation worthy of respect and worthy of preservation. Because if we don't do that, and we focus on all this other garbage that our military is focusing on right now. I mean, I think it was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff giving some speech and talking about how diversity is so important to us. Oh, please. Effectiveness and readiness is important. The diversity is a byproduct. Forget that. Focus on competence, commitment, effectiveness, readiness, and focus on choosing the very best people to get the job done. And the rest will take care of itself. We've got to deal with the fact that we're giving our young people puppy therapy when at their age, before World War II, we had people their age going off to storm the beaches of Normandy. and we're giving puppy therapy and crying rooms, and you got to have, people have got to have safe spaces and all. I mean, I think that we are at the precipice of being so demoralized that we'll be in no position to fight an enemy. Not an enemy of the kind of like China. I mean, thank God we're still deploying special ops people, and they're still going around the world and dealing with little conflagrations here and there. But I'm talking about a situation where it requires the massive mobilization of our people. I think probably half of us would be ready. I wonder about the half that's in the Democrat Party. I wonder about the half that's on the left, because they are so busy denouncing our country that I can't imagine that they would think that remaining a constitutional republic is better than coming under a communist regime. I can't imagine that they believe that. I don't think they do believe that. I don't think Bernie Sanders believes that. So we have got some serious internal problems that must be addressed. That's partly why I wrote my book, Sweet Land of Liberty, Reflections of a Patriot Descended from Slaves. In fact, in my book, I deal with our military readiness in the book. I talk about that because I know that that is critical to preserving who we are. We've got to be ready to defend what we have. I mean, I may have said this yesterday, but folks, in heaven, there's no question we will beat our plows into our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they study war anymore. Praise God. But that's not here. And by the way, folks, I just want to be clear. I am in no way arguing for war. Thank God I've never seen combat, but I know those who have. And there's nothing pretty about it. There's nothing romantic about it. It's ugly and it's real. But sadly, in a sick world, in a sinful world, sometimes it's necessary. I talk about, in my book, I deal with American military supremacy and national security. I talk about critical race theory in the military. I talk about our immigration system. That's not really military stuff. Social engineering and military wokeness. In my book, I address these issues because I know that this is critical to our remaining a sweet land of liberty. In fact, you know what comes before that? Restoring American pride. Here's part of what I say, and I know I'm getting to the end. I say, when I started writing this book, there was a movement in the country to tear down our historical statues and monuments. It began with Confederate statues in the South, but many foresaw that it would not end there. They were right. The statues of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Frederick Douglass soon came under attack. Christopher Columbus is one of those formerly revered figures who is now attacked as a racist. It is no longer politically acceptable to celebrate Columbus Day. In many localities, it is being replaced with Indigenous Peoples Day. Columbus' incredible courage as an explorer is ignored. His mission to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, as revealed in his journal, is defamed as white supremacy. And on I go. And I finally end this section with this paragraph. We all owe repentance to God, but America owes no apology to the world. We have been no worse than any other country, and by most measures far better. That is the truth about American history. We must pass on our patriotic affection for America, regardless of our complexion or ancestry, so we may live and work together to make this shining city on a hill brighter and more beautiful with each generation. That's the attitude that we've got to instill in our people, as opposed to America's a white supremacist country, America's a racist country, America's unjust, America's this, America's that, America stole the land from the Indians. I mean, here again, all of it, as far as I'm concerned, is complete and utter nonsense. It is a lie. It is a mischaracterization of who we are based upon a political agenda. So, folks, we've got a lot of work to do, and we're going to get it done. In the name of Jesus, we're going to get it done. Do not remove the ancient landmarks which your fathers have set. We're going to remember who our founding fathers were. In fact, I won't get into this, but eventually I'm going to have to talk a little bit about apparently Charlie Kirk going off the rails and attacking Martin Luther King Jr. And I'll put all that in perspective at another time. I don't have time to do that today. But I simply brought it up because my point is, my first reaction to what he was saying was, but you know, that's the same thing the left does to our founding fathers. They find their flaws, because every human being except Jesus Christ was a flawed and sinful human being. They find their flaws, they magnify those, and then they say, we don't owe these people, these are terrible people, we don't owe them any honor, we don't owe them any, which is a way of really delegitimizing America and demoralizing our people. We just got to stop that. Of course we have problems. Of course we have allowed the left to normalize sin. And we got to address all of that. But the basic framework for freedom, for Judeo-Christian morality, for family, for limitations on government to assure individual liberty, those foundations must be preserved, because those are the foundations that make us the greatest nation in the history of mankind. And if we will do that, we will have something to pass on to your grandchildren and my grandchildren and our great-grandchildren until Jesus comes. And that's what it's ultimately all about, folks. Whether we're dealing with the internal division that I started this program with, or we're dealing with the foreign threat that I ended it with, namely China. We have got to have a strong core of belief in ourselves, belief in who we are and what we stand for. I would say rooted and grounded in belief in the God who gave us America and gave us our founding fathers. And then we will assure that we remain the land of the free, because we are the home of the brave. God bless each and every one of you. You can see surrounding me all the ways that you can connect and support. StandAmerica.us, AmericasForgottenChildren.com, thecall.org. There's my book there. You can get that on the Stand website. Or you can get it on our publisher's website, FaithfulText.com, or wherever books are sold. And of course, today's program, E.W. Jackson for America. Well, folks, as I've said many times before, I will continue to stand up for the flag, for our country, for our Constitution, for our Judeo-Christian values and way of life until I breathe my final breath. But I will never quit. I will never back down. I will never give up. I will never give in. Because I believe that that is my responsibility as a Christian before God for the great gift that He's given us in the United States of America. I don't worship our country. I worship God. But I consider myself to be a steward of our country because it's a gift that my God, my Heavenly Father, has given to all of us. So I know you feel as I do, and will as I will, stand up, step up, speak up, refuse to back up. Because we cannot be defeated if we will not quit. Because we are on God's side.